Thank you for joining us right here at the Africa Women Innovation and Entrepreneurship Forum, which is taking place right here in Cape Town. Looking at the statistics, it's very interesting that have come out in this entire day and a half, because since yesterday we've been looking at the statistics. It seems to be changing, the fact that more women are getting involved in entrepreneurship on the African continent. However, they're not getting as much funding as their male counterparts, as much as you're seeing a potential, according to McKinsey, of a potential to add $12 trillion to global GDP by 2025. But also this morning there's been a very interesting conversation that was taking place in terms of media, harnessing the media for women empowerment and entrepreneurship in Africa. And there was a great moderation that was taking place, whereby this discussion was taking place, and Nicolas Pompigne-Mognard, who is a founder and chairman of APO Group, was part of that discussion. Well, we're going to have Nicolas with us right now to assist us on that. Nicolas, thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you for having me, Benjamin.
Now, let's look at this discussion this morning, harnessing the media for women empowerment and entrepreneurship in Africa. That narrative is not coming out very strongly, as much as the statistics are showing that more women are involved in business and entrepreneurship on the African continent. However, the media is not really telling that narrative as strongly as we'd like to see it.
Well, to be honest, we are in our activity. We are spending our time pitching the media for stories and etc. Approaching the media for stories, to encourage them to publish stories. And to be honest, I see quite a lot of success stories of young women entrepreneurs which have created some company from scratch in all corners of Africa. So I won't be specific about South Africa, but wherever I'm traveling, I can say that there are some role models, women, and which are positioned by the media are role model for young women entrepreneurs, etc. So I think if you browse on the internet right now, if you actually look at the media, you're going to find some stories about women which became from scratch successful entrepreneurs, and they appear to be a role model for other women and girls, and that's the very topic we discussed this morning. To the question how exactly the African media can help empower the woman to become entrepreneur and etc. One of the answer is obviously by talking more, by giving more media coverage, more space in the media about those profiles of success stories, those women which which bootstrap from difficulties and actually create a company, and then or become entrepreneur, and then become an actual role model. So other young girls and women can see it's possible, but also the men can see it's possible, and until the day maybe it's going to become like normal.
Well, what's creating that lack of angst, especially from mainstream media? Because maybe we could have it from smaller broadcasters, whereby you are seeing that narrative change. But it seems like the mainstream, which is we were talking about this debate yesterday, me and you talking about how we're seeing more and more international mainstream media dominating in terms of telling the African narrative. However, those success stories are not coming out strongly from those particular positions.
Well, to answer to your question, first of all, I believe you need to look at the gender presence repartition within the media organizations themselves, and you will find out that the senior executive in the media, the chairman, including the managing editor, etc., more often than not are men and not women. So maybe they are not very inclined or prone to discuss those matters and those topics, referring to women empowerment, etc. So we need to have more women at a senior level, management level in the media, so they can also push that narrative and that agenda. The other answer is yes, it's about the fact that the international media, the so-called international media, are more and more investing in Africa, and they are now becoming the competitor. I mean, right now the the competitor of a national African media is not the other media next door. It's the CNN, the BBC, etc., etc. We know that, and the reason why I was referring to the so-called international media is that because I'm giving conferences. I started a series of conferences across Africa. I went to this year. I went into 8 countries. I gave conferences in journalism schools and universities and publication schools. So I went to Ethiopia, to Zambia, Uganda, Senegal, etc., etc. And I'm always explaining to the students that there is not such a thing as international media. When you refer to them as international media, you kind of assume or pretend or give them some kind of objectivity, etc. What they are, in fact, are national media with an international geographical coverage.
Sure.
So CNN is an international media. There is a national media, US media. Al Jazeera is a Qatar media, etc. But they have an international geographical coverage. So they have the ability, the CNN, the BBC, the Al Jazeera, to broadcast on
a larger scale
on the African continent, where we don't have that. We don't have that Nigerian media, South African media, etc., etc., which has that rich international reach.
Sure.
You see. So the fact that the international media are investing so heavily on the continent during the last 5 years is a real concern for the African media landscape as a whole.
And what does that mean for women representation, especially for women who are in business and who are entrepreneurs? Can that actually stifle the new narrative that we as Africans want to tell about the continent in media?
Well, I mean, the question you're asking is impacting, I mean, that specific point about the woman, etc. But it's actually more than that. It's the question you're asking is what is happening on a continent or in a country where when most of the inhabitants are learning what is happening in their country or in their continent from international media. Okay, that leads to acculturation. That leads to, I mean, do we want our kids, South African kids, to learn Africa through BBC program and CNN program and Al Jazeera program? It's an angle. Why not? Okay, fine. But I mean, is it what we want really? We need to be able to provide an African alternative for sure. And so there are plenty of questions related to sovereignty, related to acculturation. And what we see is that we have, APO is working with 300 clients, mostly corporation and mostly US-based client. And what we see is that they are more and more investing on Africa. They used to be, based in South Africa and happy with being in South Africa, but now they want to expand. And they have a lot of, they have big plans, let's say, for the continent, expansion plan. And of course, it's come with advertising budget. Well, the problem is that, according to several market research companies, African in several countries, for instance Nigeria, are starting to spend more time watching the international media than the local media. And so at some point, those international companies, when it come to spend their advertising budget, well, where exactly are they going to spend their budget? Are they going to spend the budget with the local national media or the international media?
Well, let's look at that. I mean, we here at AWIEF, Women's Innovation Conference. Are we having enough disruptors that are telling a different narrative, especially around women? Are we seeing that happening in a scale that we'd like to see it? Because we are, I mean, it's fantastic when we heard that World Bank representation yesterday, where the presenter there was stating the fact that we are seeing more women involved in the entrepreneurial space and in business. However, we don't seem to see that shift in the mainstream media landscape. I think that's very problematic because we still have certain images of Africa that still are representative of kind of an uncomplex Africa.
Yeah. Well, I own a Pan-African company, so I'm not
Sure.
focusing on South Africa.
I know that. Sure.
And I'm traveling across the world, etc. I mean, from where I stand, and you probably heard about that study, which is actually from the World Bank, if I'm not mistaken, which established that globally, on a global scale, on the planet, the startups are created by something like 15% of the women or something like that. But in Africa, it's more than that. It's actually 25.
Sure.
So in Africa, vast continent, 54 countries. Of course, there are vast inequality, between discrepancy between one country and the other. But the overall the overall phenomenon clearly is that women are entrepreneurial, not necessarily by choice. Sometimes it's just they have no choice but to, and not necessarily with like huge multinational company or whatever. But there are plenty of women which are for different reasons creating companies,
which are small and medium kind of scale. Sure.
Exactly. And I mean, and I think it's make a difference. And regarding the media coverage they get, I mean, I assure you, if you browse on the internet or whatever, you're going to find those success stories, you're going to find those profiles which are intended to become role model for the young girls, etc., to show them that it's possible, to the young girls, but also to show the men that it's normal. It's the way
the world is going.
Anyway.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Let's wrap it up. I'm most interested in as an agency. I mean, we work a lot with APO, and I'm interested in that fact where you see kind of where we are going as an African media, especially in this representation of women. It is changing slowly but surely. I mean, I remember when you saw an image of an African woman, you would see her either in a farm doing some farm work. That was a typical representation, or it's either that woman was in a desert and either for a humanitarian kind of PR image. But that landscape has changed over the last 15-20 years. Definitely the imaging has changed of women, and how you have become a disruptor yourself as APO for a long time, telling new narratives. What are your thoughts around the future of representation of women in media, especially African women, going forward?
Well, as I said, I started a series of conferences in journalism school, so I'm talking to the journalists, the future journalists, the one which are going to be journalists in 6 months, in a year, etc., the future of the profession. And I see passionate young women which are ready to play their part in that process. They want to leave the place when they're going to be retired journalists. They want to leave the place in a better shape that they find it. They are ready to push that narrative, and that includes obviously, as I said a little bit earlier, making sure we find more women at senior executive and position in the African media landscape itself.
Sure.
I mean, when I'm traveling across Africa, I'm also meeting media owners, etc., and it's a fact that they are all men.
Yeah.
So this needs to change.
Fantastic.
This needs to change.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Nicolas, for giving us your time, and I'm sure we'll keep the partnership with you, with Channel Africa.
Absolutely.
And thank you for joining us. It's great meeting you finally, because you guys are always bombarding us with information every single day. I'm sure I get something from your agency in my email, so it's finally great to meet you. It's very helpful, very helpful, very relevant as well.
Okay.
That's Nicolas Pompigne-Mognard, who is a founder and chairman of APO Group.